God of War is a series I've held very dear to my heart since I played it originally back in 2006 as a Reyes Magos present, not that much later than Christmas. During the months of March and April of 2018, I decided to start a retrospective on the whole series, except for Betrayal, as an excuse to revisit the collection and to refresh myself of the overarching plot in preparation for God of War 4. However, I will not be doing that in this channel. If you're interested in hearing what I have to say about the previous games, you can head up to my primary channel, in which I upload video game content in Spanish. I said God of War 4 because this is unequivocally a sequel to God of War 3. How well it holds up to scrutiny on the said statement is a different discussion altogether. I'm here not to talk about plot or characters in depth, as much as to give some food for thought for the upcoming entries in the series. There was already a warning at the beginning of the video, but I must remind everyone that there will be footage that can be considered spoilers, both major and minor. From now on, I will be referring to Give Me God of War difficulty. I have to start by saying that God of War 4 is a great video game, a flawed one, but great nonetheless. There is no denying that combat is the main focus during the whole campaign. I, like I'm sure many others, had my fears that we would get God of Last of Us, particularly after watching that god-awful 2016 reveal. I am happy to say that said vertical slice is not only not in the game, but the systems of combat are definitely improved. While there's a small reference to this demo and some of the events still do happen, the final product is far better than the picture that reveal painted. It must have had to do with all the fun posting with this particular image of Kratos shouting. You all know what I mean. I can't remember any instance of this precise still in the game, however. Atreus does indeed shoot his father with an arrow, but in the game we ended up getting this happens by choice of the kid, and not by mistake. Let's get straight into the fighting itself by pointing out the bigger problems. It cannot be avoided, it's by design, but God of War 4's camera is among the worst offerings in third-person action games. There's simply no denying that the very low field of view unlocked to Kratos' shoulder makes keeping an eye on every opponent a challenge in itself. This statement isn't the problem per se, since in any video game in which the player can control the camera, there will be instances in which maintaining a target in sight will prove difficult. The issue with God of War 4 is that the difficulty turns into frustration when trying to focus a faraway enemy. The game can't keep up with the player's expectations. It doesn't help that the lock-on system is the worst to have come out in years. I can't undersell it. Locking onto an enemy just doesn't work. Trouble begins with the excessive limitation on range. It's shocking how close Kratos must be to a foe to be able to lock onto it. This translates into the impossibility to lock onto ranged creatures on high ledges, forcing Kratos to aim using the right stick, which is at best suboptimal. But this isn't the only aspect that makes this system wholly unworkable. Locking onto an enemy takes away the option to move your camera horizontally, because that input turns into a target switch. This means that once you focus on a foe, you lose almost all control of the camera, so you are at the mercy of the game's angle choice. The final point that kills lock-on is the inaccuracy of it. I lost count of the times I told the game to switch objective for it to do absolutely nothing very early in the campaign. It's quite clear that the lock-on mechanic was added without much thought or care. The next aspect that hurts the combat's flow are the progression systems. God of War 4 has a total of 6 that affect fights directly. I can only say that 2 of them do their job properly. Kratos' statistics are self-explanatory, and while I don't particularly like statistics, these are not new to God of War. We now just have a display of the numbers themselves. Power level, on the other hand, is rather interesting and nicely implemented into the game. Kratos doesn't level up in the traditional manner, in other words, by killing enemies directly. Kratos' power level is defined by the gear he wears. There's no direct correlation between gear level and statistics, meaning that you might find a power level 4 piece of equipment that happens to have similar or even slightly better statistics than a power 5 level equipment. Still, higher power level usually translates into higher statistics. What makes this whole system work is the fact that the players themselves choose what level they play at. You can't possibly overlevel. You can't become so powerful the game turns trivial without being able to stop it. You could, if you wanted, play the game at power level 1 for the whole run. I've already said that statistics are self-explanatory, but power levels do need some clarification. You can kill anything and everything at any level. The number just tells you whether you can easily launch an enemy into the air, whether you can block their attacks, parry them, or just avoid them. Enemies at your own level are easy to launch, except if they're purposely heavy creatures and can be blocked just fine. Enemies higher than 2 levels will usually break your guard, but can be parried. Enemies around 4 levels higher cannot be blocked and cannot be parried. That's how the game encourages the player to level up. With all of that, we can safely say these two progression systems work. Sadly, the progression for the weaponry itself is quite lackluster. Not only do you need to upgrade weapons at particular points in the campaign, but upgrading doesn't actually give you access to new moves. You need to buy those separately. This is convoluted and unnecessary. Santa Monica knew, or at least had a very good guess, on when the player would get any given upgrade material, so they, in theory, balanced the moves available in any given level with that guess in mind. Why then do the players need to not only go to the shop to upgrade their weaponry when the game knows they got an upgrade, but they need to also buy the moves? I believe one of these steps should be done away with in the future. I see it to be much better to just expect the player to make the trip back to Brock and Sindri's shop to build up anticipation and have the upgrade give instant access to the move list of its level. Having talked about move lists, I can just leave out the fact that Kratos begins the game severely limited. No running attack, no headshot bonus, no evade attacks, no pulse combos, but most importantly, no parry counterattacks. Of all the traditions of the God of War series, this is the one that you, Mr. Koribalog, should not have respected. The reason this is an issue is that an enemy attack instantly kills the player's momentum, forcing them to block without retaliation. If Kratos could do the heavy counter-attack by default, the early game would be much more engaging and interesting. I see absolutely no reasoning for this particular limitation. I think this way of God of War 4 and the original God of War. These upgrades aren't cheap. I don't know about the rest of the difficulty settings, but the costs in Give Me God of War ironically make the early game the most difficult part of the title. Giving instant access to counterattacks allows the player to focus on buying more interesting attacks. Countering blasts costs 3k experience. 3k experience you could be using on pulse combos or hold attacks. Countering Crush can only be purchased once you acquire the Countering Strike. Funnily enough, Santa Monica does actually give you instant access to the Block Break, a move that you will almost never use. I might just be forgetting a fight or two, but I can only think of mid-game and late-game fights in which I needed this Block Break. I want to now give some of my thoughts regarding the way to do some moves. I found this a couple of days ago. If you blink a bare-handed light evade attack after an axe recall, Kratos will enter his bare-handed pause stance even though he is holding his axe. I know this isn't actually blinking because you're not linking anything, but the hand movement and timing is so similar that I have a hard time calling it anything else. If you've played this game, you know that you're not supposed to be able to cleanly chain an attack from a weapon into an attack from another weapon without an unseating animation. But it turns out that the game itself can do it, at least with some attacks, as you can see from this footage. The heavy attack animation is the one Kratos does when chaining it from another attack. Here's how it looks if you do it regularly. As you can see, it's much slower and nowhere near as useful. Santa Monica, why not allow the player to mix the weapons during a pulse combo like DMC 2013 did? In that game you could start a pulse combo with Rebellion but finish it with the Scythe, for example. This way you make weapon switching an even more integral part of the game. I don't see much of a reason to make weapon switching a commitment. I don't understand what can be gained from this limitation. Please consider this idea when designing the next game. My next recommendation regarding inputs is about evade attacks. I set myself up for disappointment, but I was truly expecting to be able to change weapons on the fly during an evade, pressing the weapon button and have the game do a seamless transition. I don't think this was unfair of me to expect, since God of War 3 had L1 plus X as a shortcut, albeit quite a useless one to go from weapon to weapon. The second thing I have to say regarding evade attacks is that they don't work. I'm sorry Santa Monica, I'm not trying to be mean, but the description clearly stated, while evading, hold forward or backwards and press square. Yet backwards attack only work reliably while evading backwards. I just cannot say anything other than this was not tested. If you evade sideways, you can do a whirlwind storm with no problem, but I have never been able to do an evasive storm from a sideways evade. I have been able to do an evasive storm from a forward evade. I even managed to record it, but it's so horribly inconsistent that it's clear either the text should not say while evading, but instead while evading forward and while evading backwards, or someone at your team, Santa Monica, forgot to test this move. It just doesn't work. I implore anybody to try this out. I can't for the life of me figure out the timing for this. Give Me God of War difficulty was most certainly a gigantic challenge. I have no doubt in my mind that on that difficulty, this game was the most difficult title I've played in years. What's more, this game is the only one I can remember that made me want to kill myself just by how hard it is. That in itself is, of course, not a problem. The problem arrives from bloating health bars and adding super armor on every enemy with rage or higher level. I'm not the only one who has pointed this out, but the last encounter on Fafnir's rescue mission is the most difficult section in a video game in this generation. There's simply no way of justifying a Revenant that can one-hit kill you from anywhere, plus 2 heavy Vikings that block axe throws while being attacked by a dragon whose breath kills Kratos instantly but barely does any damage to the enemies. I remember it took me 4 hours to do this precise fight. I came close to do it 3 times, died 2 of them because of a random tracking poison. For reference, the longest it took me to beat a Valkyria was Rota at over 2 hours, and that was simply because I said to myself I would beat her without taking damage. These boss fights are supposed to be the most difficult encounters in the game. I have to disagree completely when there are fights that force the player to kill several enemies with super armor. I would repeat the Rota fight without much hesitation. I would not and will not be replaying Fafnir's mission ever again. Give Me God of War's difficulty has a very obvious inverted curve. It's shocking how much easier the game gets as the story progresses. I am not against different offerings for difficulty curves, but in the case of this game, I can't possibly say it was meant to be this way. Give Me God of War needs tweaking. At the very least, Kratos needs an attack that actually hurts enemies. Holding down the heavy attack does laughably little damage. It's been said constantly, and it will be brought up into the discussion for as long as it's not implemented. New Game Plus not being in this game is asinine. I don't know anything regarding game development, but I have a really hard time believing that a team as strong as Santa Monica could not have it prepared for God of War 4. This is not about tradition, it's about adding value to a purchase. Very few of us will be thinking about replaying the game a second time on Give Me God of War. If said second time were with our previous Kratos build, then I'm dead sure quite a few players would do it all over again. And I'm talking about New Game Plus of the same difficulty, like the old games. I'm not okay with beating the game and maxing out on easy and then playing the game on New Game Plus on the hardest difficulty. I can't but think of Lords of Shadow 2, another open-world third-person hack-and-slasher which did give players the option to do a New Game Plus run of the game. Mercury's team decided to take away game-changing upgrades like the double jump, but let players keep their health and magic pass alongside their move lists. I will continue to ask for this option until the end of days. One of the traditions that you, Mr. Koribalog, should have respected, you went and didn't. I don't understand. Finally, I just wanted to point out that Troy Baker has already done voice acting for God of War. He was Orcos in Ascension. For some reason, he was chosen to voice Magni. The issue comes here when I, a non-native speaker of English, could tell his voice apart from the instant he said, "Don't tell me what to do, brother." I only ever knew Modi was Nolan North after seeing it on the internet. Joel, Booker, Magni and Sam sound the same. But what's more damning is that Orcos and Magni sound the same in the same game collection. Troy Baker's voice work has been declining the last few years into always sounding the same. I can't be the only one who has noticed this. At least on big name games, Baker barely tries to use a different tone. I am dead sure he will still be casted in the future God of Wars, but I can only hope he uses a different voice for once. For now, that was all I wanted to say regarding this game. I don't intend to go as in-depth on my videos in this channel as in my primary one, and instead use this platform as a more off-the-cuff outlet to connect with the international discussion faster and in a more timely manner. That was all for now. See you soon.